Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're beginning the second day of the conference. So one more minute for you to take seats. Ladies and gentlemen, so this is the second day of the conference. I think that this day is also going to be a very interesting one with a lot of discussions thanks to you and all our presenters, as well as those who were dedicated to the project. We are very happy that you're with us. We're very happy that we can have all these discussions related to transport exclusion. And today we will have an opportunity to listen to a few interesting debates and presentations, and then we'll go on study visits, where we will be able to see some interesting places, things connected with infrastructure here in the Lower Silesia, Wrocław, Trzebnica. But first, let's give the floor to the first presenter, who is going to present as first. It's Krzysztof Jaworski. Krzysztof Jaworski, Deputy Director of the Department of Railway Projects at the Center for EU Transport Projects. He's going to talk about plans and challenges for the new fund perspective in the context of combating exclusion. He has a good voice, but he will get a microphone. So let's listen. Good morning. I'm very happy I can open this second day of the conference. On the one hand, it's a pleasure. On the other hand, it's a challenge. After yesterday's interesting presentations, I'm not sure whether you will be as interested in mine, but I'll try. I'll do my best. The topic of challenges is even more difficult. So all of us who deal with this transport topic, when we hear transport exclusion, we all think about some aspects or some areas which require improvement or which are important from the point of view of combating transport exclusion. Probably there will be some obvious things for you, but I hope that to an extent it will be interesting for you. So the topic of the presentation, plans and challenges for the new fund perspective. Well, I'm not going to talk too much about the possibilities related to the EU funds, because as our organization, we inform our beneficiaries all the time, and we encourage you to contact us because all our experts are always willing to explain details, what kind of support is possible, etc. So, of course, you can get such information. And I'm not going to go into much detail when it comes to the effects of the previous perspective. The director yesterday also showed the effects of this, the previous perspective. So I'm going to talk about some areas which seem to be important from the point of view of combating exclusion. This is a map on the slide, which is from timetravel.com, a private company, and it shows stops of public transport which are within 15 minutes walk from any place all over Europe. So as you can see, there are countries where this transport accessibility is much higher. Of course, we have to remember that this data is built based on infrastructure, not based on the offer of transport companies, because as was pointed out yesterday by other presenters, this offer is often varied and it depends on the area, on the region. But of course, as we can see, there are countries that we can be envious of. For example, those which are our neighbors, but also some in the south of Europe. Some of those southern countries also look good when it comes to the access to the public transport infrastructure. These conditions, geographical conditions, as we can see on the level of the whole EU, can be also observed on the level of our country. Here you can see the transport accessibility indicator. It's a tool which verifies the effects of the infrastructural investment projects financed from the EU funds. It's a result of an analysis conducted in 2021. So it was at the end of the perspective, the previous perspective. So you can see that quite naturally we've got these two main centers characterized by the highest accessibility. That is Katowice and Warsaw, and we also have some regions which are characterized by lower accessibility. There is quite high variety when it comes to the whole country. As you can see, the indicator of the interbranch accessibility is between 14 and 68, so that's quite a big difference, and the same applies to the diversity across sectors. In the context of our conference, when we talk about transport accessibility, we talk about infrastructure, like in the case of railway. So we're not talking about transport lines, the accessibility of public transport as such, but the accessibility of infrastructure. So it's one of the primary challenges that are ahead of us, because based on the analyses conducted in 2021 in the context of this indicator, so this analysis showed that the change of the indicator was between 15 and 30%. It wasn't very homogeneous around the country, and now we've got this West Pomeranian voivodeship, which has the lowest accessibility to public transport infrastructure, especially in the context of EU projects. So this challenge ahead of us is definitely further fight for bigger or higher accessibility in other areas, so that we can mitigate some effects related to it, because naturally when we talk about less accessible areas, they are areas which become depopulated quite naturally, so people are moving from there to other areas which are more accessible. We talk about the sustainable development of Poland, so in this context we should pay attention to that. So another thing that was mentioned yesterday is different solutions, various solutions or models which were implemented in Japan or in Greece, or the railway in lesser Poland. So it's also one of the challenges ahead of us. It's more focused on connecting different means of transport, and also giving up the building or extending the network only in one sector, because depending on what area we talk about, we will need different solutions, custom-made solutions, because we can talk about accessibility, walkability, about mobility, bike mobility or individual mobility, but it's more possible in urban areas When it comes to less urbanized or suburban areas, other means of transport will play this primary function role in order to provide transport accessibility. This pyramid or upside-down pyramid of mobility is something we've seen for some time. It's made or shaped in the context of urban areas, but as our presenter from Greece showed yesterday, he showed us how we can use some solutions. He showed some which is dedicated to urbanized areas. So our colleagues in Greece decided to use this tool and adapt it for the purpose of servicing Greek islands. So these solutions have to be adapted to the local conditions. We saw the example of Santorini. There is no road, so they had to provide efficient transport of passengers from the port to the main area of the island. That's why they have the cable car now. So it seems to have been the best solution at the time, an optimal model providing accessibility. But of course, every area, every situation is different. So every time we have to really look closer and make a decision about which means of transport, to what extent should be provided to our inhabitants, citizens. So this is a challenge which I identify right now when I look at the experience of the previous perspective and beginning this perspective. So the challenge I see is more focus on multimodal connections, integration of different types of transport, and providing attractive connection of these different means of transport. Because in order to encourage passengers to use public transport, we need to make sure that the quality of the service is high. So when there is an interchange, like it was in the case of Małopolskie Railway and also in Switzerland, so the interchange door to door, which minimizes the necessity of passengers moving or shortens to maximum the way or the journey the passengers have to make from one means of transport to the other.
And what actually determines the manner of implementing different solutions, ensuring accessibility of transport, are different planning, strategic documents. I've just given a few because this area for documents governing or determining how the transport sector is to be shaped across the country. There are lots of them, so I've given just a few. But what I wanted to draw your attention is that at the level of EU, we focus at the moment on the infrastructure requirements, on discussing the infrastructure itself. It was last year that there were the first glimmers on the part of the European Commission to support the carriages and organization. There are 10 links, international links, financed by the Commission as a pilot. So this is just the first sign. Usually it had been the case that the EU said that the funds at the disposal of the member states should be used for infrastructure, not for organization of transport tasks as such. But at the national level, in our plans and strategies, there were some indications of how the transport is to be organized, how it's supposed to be financed. I will not be getting into the discussion about the mass transport act, everyone would have their opinion there, but there were some voices yesterday about the necessity to rethink the structure of public transport in Poland. This is the right postulate, argument. We need to remember that right now, well, at any level of the local government, they are responsible for transport services. Some local governments do it a bit better, other worse. But if we were to discuss the organization of transport, whether it should be given in the hands of the voivodeships as such, on one hand it seems to be tempting, because there's always the level of integration, of cohesion of the approach to transport at a larger area of the country, not just a small area. But there's also a question whether at the voivodeship level the local authorities are able to identify all the necessary needs at the level of communes or powiats, because naturally you cannot perceive everything from a higher level. So the level of autonomy should be there at the lowest levels. It should be left there at when it comes to the organization of transport. What's important in the context of strategic documents, policies at the national level, no documents show the minimum requirements for the public transport. So it's really hard to say, or to put it differently, this is left at the discretion of specific local authorities, how and in what way they fulfill those tasks. Of course, we can look. We had different examples from the country. We can look at the examples at cases that really prove that the local authority or commune or powiat decided to support strongly the public transport, and actually this public transport is doing really well in a certain area. But there are communes or areas where the only public transport is the for students to schools are the school buses. Yes, so we in the past we had those trains that were left just to be going, so the buses are now, school buses are just to fulfill some tasks, so that no one picks on us that the commune does not organize the public transport. But there are also some local initiatives, strategic ones, oriented, of course, on one hand in infrastructure, but on the other it's the organization of the transport routes. So this process of investment, the EU investment in the transport area at the highest level, so the EU level, well, it focuses definitely and only actually on the infrastructure or equipment or means of transport, but it's not into organization, which seems to be one of the crucial challenges for us at the moment. This is what I've mentioned in the slide about the challenges and support, so we will not be dragging on here too much. The discussion about where the units or authorities responsible for transport, where should they get funds from? What should be the sources of funding and the level of support? This is an open discussion, and it's in no way regulated or standardized at a national level. The funding possibilities, as I already said, the tool managed at the European Commission, so itself, we get into infrastructure, digitalization, equipment. Of course, these are wide, broad categories, but the Commission does not support from the CF the equipment as such, meaning the rolling stock, but the Phoenix, FEPS, the EU funds for region or the National Recovery Plan, these areas can be funded from those sources. So this is how we can achieve what is illustrated in those two charts. On the left you have the speeds of rail in 2014 versus 21. Below 40, this was the starting point. The length is 3% now, and up to 200,000. It is 2% that is covered of the rail network. So the speed is increasing. The green and the yellow colors is 120 and 160. So the regional parameters and interregional that are sufficient for introducing the passenger traffic, relatively attractive one. And on the right we can see the increase in the length of the national roads, express roads. The express roads are those dark blue. So these are the initiatives taken in the current perspective. Well, is it 14 to 20? These were undertaken between 2014 and 20. So you can see the infrastructural effects for sure, but they do not reflect into utilization of public transport. On the left we have data of the cargo carriages, cargo transport. A bit less interesting in the context of our discussion, but also important because it shows that the road transport, despite a lot of investment, the road transport is still increasing despite investment into rail, yes, but the rail transport remains relatively the same. We can see the carried cargo, the ton kilometer index. You can see those parameters from the railway. They are more or less stable, and on the right you can see the passenger carriages and the rail carriages of passengers. Well, this graph is not fully true because there was an increase, there was the pandemic time, so right now in 2021 we are at a similar level, but generally the trend was increase, it was growing. But the blue part was the bus carriages, where we can see this drop is dramatic, which shouldn't be surprising in the context of yesterday's discussion about how many transport lines have been closed in the previous years. So as you can see, the infrastructure itself will not allow us to achieve those objectives, to meet the challenges, and we should remember about scaling the infrastructure to the needs and to direct, to link directly and to look comprehensively at the offer that we want to present. I am about to finish. So the offer that we want to present to our passengers, because the infrastructure itself will not attract the customers. We know that the process is long-term of attracting. It's very easy to discourage, but the process of attracting passengers takes a couple of years usually, where we have to assume and finance some costs that do not seem to be very rational, because we launch the links, the lines that are not very heavily loaded. But in order to encourage the passengers for certain solutions, we need to provide them with solutions so that they can abandon their means of transport for the benefit of public transport. So only linking these two elements will allow us to achieve the results. This is it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Krzysztof, for this very inspiring presentation. Now there is the first discussion panel on the second day of our conference, and I would like to invite our moderator, director of the Department of the Transport Project, Ms. Joanna Świderska. So, director of the Department of Urban Projects, Center for the EU Transport Projects, and the guest, Ms. Agnieszka Zakęś. A lot of applause. Mr. Krzysztof Jawocki again, join us here please. Mr. Grzegorz Kwitek and Dr. Mariusz Opaliński. Please join us here. Take your seats, and we are just about to start the debate. Good morning. I'm very happy to meet in such a group, as this is the topic that seems to be really oriented towards the future, very hot topic, so to say. The more that we are thinking about how to solve certain problems related with transport exclusion, and how the EU funds affect or might affect achievement of this objective, being elimination or reduction of this mitigation of the exclusion. So I would like to welcome again my guests, and let me start with a fundamental question to you, specifically to you. What is the transport exclusion? What does it mean to you? I would like to ask Ms. Agnieszka first to give us the answer. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy that you are here, that you are visiting the Dolnośląskie Voivodeship, and that we can show you today how we counteract the transport exclusion. And now, returning to the question, let me say controversially, there will always be exclusion, because there are as many definitions as there are people, because it means different to everybody. Everyone defines differently their transport needs, so it's really hard to say that we can eliminate this exclusion completely. But to us, the organizers, it's very important to map the stakeholders in the first place, so this social group for which the given organizer is responsible, then to map the objectives, the transport objectives of those stakeholders, and on top of that put the tasks to be done by the organizer. And this diagnosis showing who, where and why should be put from point A to point B. Those points also have to be mapped, and this will give us the possibility of preparing the offer that would strongly mitigate this exclusion. It will not reduce it down to zero, but it can significantly counteract this. So from my professional experience, and I'm very grateful to specific managements of Dolnośląskie Voivodeships for taking a different path for counteracting the social exclusion, because we were the first to establish the rail company from the scratch. In line, we also created the manager, the administrator of the rail infrastructure in the excluded, so to say, areas, which was to be done the revitalization works in the areas of transport exclusions. And this was on the lines that we could say, or in the areas where two generations could grow up and were deprived of the possibility of public transport, train transport. So in the areas where the rail companies would be last to do anything, because these companies were not doing anything too much. Our needs were too low, so we took this advantage that we could ourselves define what and how we want to revitalize, who and with what we want to carry. So we started to comprehensively plan our offer, comprehensively plan the rolling stock needs, and comprehensively plan the infrastructural projects related with revitalizations of the line that we got.
The process of acquiring the lines, obtaining the lines is not easy. That's why we had plans for about 400 kilometers of line. We obtained about 380, which is a good result anyway. During the revitalization, because a lot of lines are planned to be revitalized. So the definition is transport exclusion happens when the organizer, because the organizer is the responsible entity to fight, to combat the exclusion. So if the organizer doesn't provide offer which addresses the needs of those social groups that the offer should be prepared for. It's been said that municipalities organize transport of children to school. It's based on the act of education system, and it's great that they do it, but they don't have financial means to provide transfers on a large scale in all of the municipality. But the voivodeship is in a better situation because legislature has equipped, by means of an act on railway transport, equipped them with the means. Voivodeship means they are not enough, but we did receive something that made it possible for us to start developing the offer, to start planning. So we're in a better situation. But we do feel, we voivodeships, we feel obliged to be maybe not the leader, but an entity which connects, an entity which cooperates with other entities of local authorities. But okay, maybe we are getting ahead too much, but to sum up, it seems to me that what's most important from what you've said is that first we diagnose the needs. First we should diagnose the needs. So this is the basic value. And based on that value, we should custom-made the service, make the service, the transport service, in order to later plan what we need. That is, what kind of infrastructure, what kind of rolling stock, and what means to use to maintain these means of transport. Now, maybe Dr. Opaliński will answer the question. When it comes to the powiat and municipality transport, what does exclusion mean in this context? Thank you very much. Hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. First, I would like to refer to what Director Zakęś said, but well, here in Wrocław it is said that the director is the godmother of the Silesian Railway. So of course she deserves a big round of applause. I hope I'm not offending you in any way. That wasn't my purpose. But the thing is that were it not for her and for her team, who is in the room today, in Lower Silesia, we would really see what transport exclusion is. Yesterday I told you a story about how my holiday trip from Mielno to Kołobrzeg looked when I wanted to use the public transport, unfortunately without success because there were varying timetables. In the end, I learned that the connection I wanted to use is only a seasonal connection, which runs during a summer holiday. I got to Kołobrzeg, but when I was going back, I wanted to use public transport. So how did it look? At 5:24 there is the last train on Saturday from Kołobrzeg to Koszalin. The next one is only on Sunday in the morning. So I wanted to catch this last train on Saturday. I got on it. 1802 I was in Koszalin. What next? There is a small boat that goes from Jamno to Mielno on a lake, Jamno Lake. But to get there from the railway station, to get to the boat, well, that was a challenge. So I had to take a bus to Bukowe settlement, where I had 8 minutes to change to bus number 1. I got on the bus, I wanted to buy a ticket. I see a ticket machine, 17, 18 positions, zone A, zone B. I had no idea what it was all about. Before I checked the price of the ticket, because they offer combined ticket for Koszalin transport and the boat. So I was going through these tickets. There was a line of people behind me. So at some point I thought maybe it's a way to avoid buying the ticket, just going through this. But in the end I bought the ticket. The weather was just before the storm, like yesterday in Wrocław, so nobody could tell me whether the boat would go in this kind of weather. But in the end, it turned out that the boat went, and I could admire a beautiful sunset over the lake Jamno. Why am I telling you this? Well, there were 6 connections from Kołobrzeg to Koszalin. On working days, there are only 6 pairs on working days. At weekends, there are only 3. The last train goes at 5:24 in the afternoon. The whole journey, it's not a long distance, but it took 3 hours. It's a tourist connection I am talking about, but I've been looking at it for a few years, and very often in the harbor in Jamno, I see this scene. A nearly empty bus comes from the city, whereas a few coaches full of tourists wait for the boat to anchor at the harbor because they want to go on a boat. And this shows the offer, which in theory there is, but when you think about the categories outside of the season, if I wanted to use this connection every day, 50 kilometers for 2.5 hours, well, I must say honestly that it doesn't really add up to me. So yesterday I had to leave during our meeting, so please forgive me if now I'm going to repeat something that was said yesterday. But let me just say that about 20 kilograms ago I had an injury, leg injury, so for some time I had to use crutches when walking, and I was in shock because my perspective changed completely, my perspective of getting anywhere. I live in the center of Wrocław. It's about 7-8 minutes on foot to a stop when I'm not injured. Now it turned out that to get downstairs from the second floor, I needed 15 to 20 minutes. Then I needed a special route because not every curb is easy to walk when you are walking with crutches. A short time ago there was a map published in Wrocław, which was routed. It's a map of transport accessibility in the city, and the city is divided into a few zones. So the center where I live is in the zone which has highest transport accessibility in the city, but I remember that a dozen years ago I went to my GP. I had an appointment, the doctor was late by about 40 minutes, and to say sorry, he told me a story. This is the Oławskie Suburban, a few minutes walk from the market square in Wrocław. There are some lower buildings, 4-story buildings, which were revitalized, so it's nice going there for a walk. But how did the doctor explain his delay? He said that year after year, there are more and more patients who are 70, 80 years old and who want him to come home to them because they are not able to leave the 4th or 3rd floor in the building without a lift, and they simply can't walk to the doctor's office. So I didn't want to repeat what was said yesterday. I didn't want to reduce, on the other hand, what I wanted to tell you. But the conclusion is that transport exclusion is the necessity to have a car. Sometimes in the center, when it comes to the number of citizens, there are whole quarters, whole areas of real transport exclusion, which is related to social exclusion, which results in social exclusion. So I wanted to give this new aspect to what's been said already, and maybe this is where I will stop. Thank you very much. I think that all of us will grow old, and there will be more and more of us. So now we are shaping our future, so to speak, and I think we should remember about it. Because younger people who are 20, 25 years old don't think about it yet. But I would say for everyone of my generation, we are starting to think about it, and we do realize that it is ahead of us. So how we shape this world will be reflected in how we will be able to use it, to summarize what you've said. And now I would ask Mr. Grzegorz to also comment. Hello. Thank you also for inviting me to this conference. I won't say anything revolutionary, I think, because transport, and when it comes to the transport exclusion, there are three aspects to me. The first one is the infrastructure accessibility. So as a person with various needs, with different types of mobility, how these people are supposed to get to the station or to a bus stop. As a metropolis, we noticed it at the beginning, and we published a recommendation. We said that even the new infrastructure leaves a lot to desire. Some of the projects do not see or do not realize, or their authors do not realize that they should design solutions for everyone, not just for those who are fully able to move. So we published a recommendation for metropolises in the case of walking zones, pedestrian zones, and also zones connected with public transport. Sometimes there was some resistance when it comes to the designers. So now these cities attach our recommendations as the mandatory aspect of a tender. The second aspect is what's been said, that is exclusion related to low quality of the offer. I must say that this is also something we're dealing with every day. Our powiat on the area of metropolises, no powiat realizes or completes its obligations when it comes to public transport. So the whole burden is on the metropolis, but also on municipalities and local authorities of the voivodeship. So the areas which don't have good connections had to be taken over. Well, the powiats weren't dedicated to this before. And the last aspect is the digital exclusion in the time of smartphones, buying tickets in the cloud, etc. Some citizens don't want to or can't use this type of solutions, and we need to remember about them. We need to design solutions for them, which will make it possible for them to use public transport. I sometimes come across elderly people who say, I would use the bus, but I don't know how to buy a ticket. And it's also a barrier which often makes it more difficult for these people who would like to use the transport but cannot. A short anecdote from my city. I live in a new part of the city. It's one of the oldest parts which has been developed. There used to be no transport or scarce transport. It's been developed, and before the citizens were against bus going there. However, the whole network, the whole settlement has developed, and after a few years, after talks to authorities, we managed to start a minibus line which connects the cemetery which was built 2 kilometers away from the city. Also,
for the All Saints Day was the public transport opened, and one of the residents says that she started to live. This minibus made her change their lifestyle. Before that, she had been cramped, locked in her flat for 8 or 9 hours until her daughter came from work and could take her somewhere. And the daughter says that you can't now stop the mother because she can now handle her own things, go to the doctor or go to the cemetery. And what's more, the drivers say that people who get there to the cemetery, they bring to the drivers the cookies, the sweets, because they can finally get to the place that is important to them. So we can see that this exclusion can be perceived in many aspects, and this is something for the coming years. Thank you very much. I thought to myself that in this context of the transport exclusion, spatial planning is important, especially when it comes to big or city agglomerations. And this is important to first think about how to provide the transport links for the given housing estate or district, and then to issue permits for construction, for management of the land. And it was already mentioned several times here. Thank you very much. Ms. Agnieszka, you started a little bit about the operations of the activities of the Lower Silesia Voivodeship. I would like you now to refer from your point of view. Well, my personal opinion is that the punishment is important and the reward is important in these kind of questions. So we need to have the effect of incentive, something pleasant to achieve the objective being mitigation of the transport exclusion. But there must be also some force, enforcement and imposing certain aspects, like what Mr. Grzegorz said, that the designers are forced to consider certain aspects in the projects related with designing the needs of the disabled, etc. So in this context, Ms. Agnieszka, what are the biggest challenges that were ahead of you, and how did you cope with them in the Dolnośląskie Voivodeship when it comes to mitigation of the transit exclusion? It's better to give the example. So the most recent example showing how we can restore the rail in the area that it had not been there, that there had been a whole generation of people who don't know rail. This is the Płock and Stronie Śląskie example train. Well, I can say that we are crazy. We want to provide the substitution transport for the inactive train line. Well, this couldn't work, you might say. So we had to persuade the reluctant one for a long time, the manager, the administrator of the infrastructure. What was our point? Our point was to secure the first and the last line. It's not a problem to move around in places where there is a rich interregional offer. It's important to get out of this small village, small town, to get safely to the changeover stage center and to get further. And the talks with the local government officers, this was about incentives and force, yes? They didn't understand. They say, let's have the bus. And I said, no, the bus will not give us the comprehensive effect. In the rail substitution transport, first, in each browser, web browser, there will be this service. Everyone, even from Warsaw, who wishes to get to Stronie Śląskie could get there. Secondly, we will not leave the passengers, let's say, unattended. We had a situation that there was a long, let's say, distance, and there were people who were traveling by train from Wrocław and they wanted to change. There were 2 or 3 people. So the operator, the railway, took action to order a taxi. So not that the 50 people on the bus are waiting because of the delay. That was not the guilt of the operator, yes? So those people could go, and those 2 passengers were taken by a taxi that took them exactly to the door. So the effect was even more impressive. So good example will not give you the scale effect as bad example, but this is just something that is the seed that is growing, that, well, actually it's quite okay. But if the people had been unattended, then it would have spoiled the whole project. So we put a lot of emphasis on taking care of the passenger, so that we don't have the situation that they feel left. This was the incentive, yes, the reward. We showed that we will do our best to make the passengers happy. Well, and this enforcement, this, let's say, punishment issue, we expected cooperation. This is a task in terms of powiat links, so this is the voivodeship task. So in this scenario, that this is the rail service between Wrocław and Stronie, we made it a voivodeship related task, so we could participate economically, but we also asked the interested local governments to participate in the costs. It was hard to talk. It's hard to talk about money. We declared that half of the compensation on this bus distance will be paid from the voivodeship budget, and the other half, well, the communes have to provide funds. And it was when they understood what it meant, on the first day of launching the service, when they saw what happened, that suddenly the secondary school students, the passengers got a very good offer for getting to schools. The mayors of this town said, my daughter came and bought the ticket, and she said, I saved half of the price because the rail tariff was much more attractive than the bus, other than the comfort of traveling. Of course, we took care of low floor access, panoramic bus, and there is a conductor on the bus. So if there is the conductor on the bus, there is not a problem that there is an elderly lady getting on and saying, I don't have a ticket. That conductor will take care of her. If she continues the journey, they will sell the ticket to the destination, and this means the feeling of safety, security. What else? The Dolnośląskie rails, for many years at our request, they have been issuing those timetables. Every year they just appear and they disappear at once at the windows. Not everyone uses a smartphone. Some kids have those parental lock on their smartphone for external links. So how do those kids find out what the timetable is? This is from this paper leaflet table, yes? And it's the same story with elderly people who are afraid that if they use the internet too much, they will pay too high bills. So this is what's their solution in their handbag. Other than that, we issue for those mobile ones who want to travel across the region. This is the timetable for all the services in the region. Of course, this is for the 2 operators. It's not only for KD, for the Dolnośląskie rail, but there's also Polregio. to us passengers, it's the same carrier, yes? So we need to take care of them together. And also for the bus lines, this is what we have, these leaflets. Every time the timetable changes, actually it's a couple of times a year, this is updated and issued. Mr. President Zadowski yesterday said that the carriages, several weeks carriages, they account for over 7,000 passengers. This is a very good result. We had some services where we had to add one more bus because there were 9 tickets who wanted to travel. So this shows that there is a need, there is the customer, and what's important, this is a proactive action, as the Dolnośląskie Voivodeship plans about the current financial perspective. We are intending to revitalize the railway line to Stranie from the EU funds, even though it's a rail company line. We are at the final stage of the contract for handing over the management from the national administrator to the local administrator, operator for 30 years. And under this contract, this revitalization works will be carried out, funded by the EU funds. We have been preparing it, and I hope that the legal process related with signing the contracts will go more or less smoothly and be completed after many years of looking for a legal solution here. But once we have this line revitalized, we will have the customer ready. Not the customer that for 2 generations had not known what a train is. So they already know what the train is, how to move around in the space, how to buy a ticket, where to find information. We want to build trust to rail. And this is the key to mitigate the exclusion. Without the trust to the operator, the traveler will not be brave enough to travel. Thank you very much. Mr. Mariusz, you wanted to refer to this? I have the whole set of those timetables. I'm still looking very greedily at this booklet. I was counting on that actually. I travel as a passenger. I use the service that the director is talking about. So the comments of other travelers are very positive. They say at last we have a stable journey to Kłodzko, and this was stable, not as it was the case before. So I would like to tell you about my, let's say, story. It's in the middle of the pandemic. As the circulation of documents was lengthy, in February 2022 we started a new service on the route where Oława public buses was routing. Strzelin is not our association, so this public buses, they launched the service at 4:50 to Wrocław and the other one at 1:50 p.m. This was service for no one, and once they found out that it's nobody is using this line, they say we are closing the line because there are no people willing to. So we took the thing in our hands, and the conclusion was that in the middle of lockdown, where all the kids were sitting at home, half of the people were working remotely, we were supposed to start a bus line. So as the people were sitting at home, there's nothing to do, let this bus go. Let them see that something is systematic day after day. And as I found out after 2 weeks that this works. I saw that on the Facebook profile, kids were agreeing to meet and have secretly a kebab at the station. Okay, and the priest called me after some time to say whether those buses will be continuous, because from other parish church the members of congregation wanted to come to his church, and suddenly at 5 p.m. there were 20 or 30% occupied of the.
I think that in all our deliberations, maybe we show that we don't have enough trust to the passenger, because if the offer is good, the passenger will find it. Once I was called by a director of a school in Wrocław asking me if there is a stable connection, because she wanted to organize apprenticeship in a factory outside of Wrocław for her students. So she wanted to know whether she was able to put the students, the pupils, safely on the bus, and if she wanted to make sure that the connection wouldn't disappear during the duration of the apprenticeship. So it's not that the passengers only go to Wrocław, because it also happens that some passengers want to go out of Wrocław. So when it comes to the carrot, that's it. The association is a Powiat municipality association. We have the association of rural municipalities or rural town municipalities. Sometimes what's treated in case of a town as a stick, in case of a village, can be treated as a carrot. For example, when there is an interchange door to door to a bus, to a train, I would treat it as a carrot, not as a stick. And in those localities where our bus don't get yet because there are 14, 15 or 35 inhabitants, then refusing them to have access to this kind of connection would be discrimination. So it is needed in village, rural areas, but it should be organized in such a way that the stop is seen from the car park, and so that walking from the car park to the station doesn't need going through the whole village. So this kind of activities we're trying to do in order to get the passenger, to encourage the passenger, attract the passenger. And I think we are quite successful. We have happy passengers. There are more and more of them. When it comes to other solutions, we are working on them, for example, with the Lower Silesia Railway. And I think we will have a chance to talk about later. Thank you very much. Now, from the point of view of institutions, Krzysztof, we are working at CEUTP, so we deal with a lot of EU funds. I would like you to tell us about the most important recommendations, what we should pay attention to, what might be the stick, what might be the carrot for projects which solve this problem or reduce the transport exclusion, especially when it comes to the metropolitan railway that you are dealing with in your department. I would say that trust to passenger is something we should have so that they use our good offer, but I would sharpen the stick a little, because I'm afraid that this volume that will change to this well-organized transport will not be big enough if we put too many obstacles on the way to use individual transport. In answer to your question, I think that what is key is the comprehensiveness. When we talk about both the stick and the carrot, and also comprehensiveness of approach, so realizing or seeing all the needs, realizing that we can't find solution to all areas of extraction. I hope in future we will be able to answer all individual needs of our citizens when it comes to transport. But so, identification of needs, as detailed as possible, scaling the right infrastructure, So maximum securing of easy interchanges that will attract passengers. And what seems to me very important in comprehensiveness is the offer, well-designed offer and stability of the offer. What the director said about the replacement transport or auxiliary transport, well, if we agree with the passenger that there are 8 pairs of trains per day, then in spite the fact of the hour change, if there are still 8, the offer is in a way stable. So this and providing transport irrespective of the conditions, because these solutions during the pandemic, around the pandemic, where we wanted to show our prospective passengers that there is this transport even in such a situation, and it's going to keep functioning. This is what can also encourage passengers. And the preparation of a project, of a plan, custom-made plan for a given region, for a given area, whether we look from the point of view of a voivodeship or a municipality or a powiat, it will help us make a project, prepare a project which will bring de facto benefits to the citizens. And also combining different means of transport, because you mentioned the metropolitan railway, but we won't get everywhere by railway. So we also need some additional connections that have to be provided so that we build the trust of the passengers. So before we start sharpening the stick, of course, we have to provide some possibilities to the passengers, but then in the most urbanized areas, we will have to put some obstacles ahead of some users to discourage them from individual transport. So of course, first the carrot, because if we just take out our sticks without providing any sensible offer, nothing will function. Yes, I would agree with that the plan and the response to this comprehensiveness is the plan of sustainable urban mobility, which we are also financing. The preparation of such plans supports the cities. There is a consulting service, and it's as part of criteria that we are preparing with the subsidy of Phoenix funds. We award the cities that ban individual transport from the center of the cities, and where the projects are about building park and rides and the interchange points in the suburban areas outside of the city. So if a city introduces such restrictions, it will be able to get financing to build an interchange loop, interchange point in its outskirts, so that the inhabitants of these areas can change from individual transport to public transport without going by cars into the center. Let me get to Grzegorz. So remembering that the plans of sustainable urban mobility to a large extent focus on social participation and participation of the society in the planning, diagnosing of their needs, and taking into account that they really look at it seriously, then in what way can GZM share their thoughts, conclusions about social participation and how it can positively affect the lowering of transport exclusion? Yes, right now we are completing a project which makes railway closer to passenger, and as part of the project investments we organized on the line which connects big cities from Katowice to Chorzów, Bytom, Tarnowskie Góry. Now the line is being modernized, and we decided to see how this investment will affect the inhabitants and how the inhabitants perceive such investments, especially in the context of accessibility. We organized this so-called research walks with different groups of interest, such as mothers with children, people in wheelchairs, elderly people. These are small groups, 10-person group, selected representative groups which want to use public transport. And these are people who live in close vicinity to the planned or modernized stops. And on that basis, we want to present a report which will show how we should proceed with the investments, because apart from infrastructure investments connected with the building of the railway line and railway stops, environment is also important. How to get to the stop, how to communicate it with the remaining network, tram network, bus network. So that's why we are organizing these research walks, which have shown that we don't necessarily need big money, a lot of money, to make public transport or getting to public transport more friendly. It unfortunately turned out that some projects that were completed or will be completed not necessarily respond to the needs or satisfy the needs of all inhabitants. There are some other ways which will meet their needs better. So I think on this example, well, it's a pilot project that CUPT, I hope, will want to promote nationwide. And it shows that it's not costly and it's not horrible, and it can bring really good tangible effects. And what's important is also time in which we do it. So it's important to do it even before the concept is shaped, so that we know what the expectations of the inhabitants are, so that those who shape the concept plans, documentation, so that they know what to focus on. So I think these research walks and the whole participatory process in the autumn, with the participation of inhabitants and experts, will bring a lot of benefits. And I hope we will be able to show some tools that can be used when shaping transport infrastructure. Thank you. Let me just add that as part of the Phoenix criteria for urban project, we have this this criterion, which is very important when if a beneficiary plans an audit with the resources for people with disabilities during the planning or after the completion, they will be awarded with a lot of points. Just to get back to the previous topic about planning, because some SUMP so far have been very technical and they focused on transport. But there is a new approach which is implemented now, and it's connected with spatial planning. In our area, it is a problem because we've got these developments from 200 years ago. Our railways were designed in 3 different partitions. We have this triangle of 3 emperors, and our area was divided in 3 partitions. It was in 3 different countries, and the railway was designed in the 19th century. So the course of this railway actually reflects today the national border from the 19th century. So in our projects, we are trying to connect, to put together, combine these lines, these railways, in order to be able to create different directions that have been used so far. However, there is this matter that has been built over it, and in many cases it makes it very difficult to rebuild tram lines or railway lines. There was a tram in the past which crossed 2 countries because it left in Bytom. The passengers were locked in the tram. It went through the German area, and then the passengers were let out.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thank you very much. I wanted to ask some questions, but there's not enough time. I'm happy anyway that we are able to tackle some interesting issues, hopefully to the benefit of our listeners. Thank you very much. And now there is going to be a break. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miss Joanna Świderska. No break yet. There's going to be a summary of our today's conference. A lot of interesting topics, very substantial topics, provoking thoughts for a long time. But the director of the EU, Miss Joanna Lech, director of the EU Transport Funds, will tell us more regarding the summary. It's a very difficult task. I think it's an impossible task to wrap up on so many topics and plots that were mentioned during our 2 days conference. Very interesting, very inspiring. I hope not only to me, but also I would go back to our topic of conference, the EU funds as an opportunity to mitigate the transit exclusion in Poland. And this is not with a question mark at the end. Look, but this is just a statement. Thanks to the EU funds, thanks to our work, this transport exclusion can be mitigated, can be reduced so that it doesn't have impact on other kinds of exclusion. So we had different points of view. The perspective from the national level, strategic level, through the local perspective, which is the key in providing and planning effective transport, for which I want to thank our speakers. But the most important aspects were also emphasized, which we should take into consideration when planning infrastructure. Correction, planning mobility, planning accessibility of services, accessibility of schools, destinations for our citizens. Infrastructure is just a part of the bigger whole. We have the infrastructure that is the basis, that us in the center of the EU transport funds, we are very, we work very closely. Sometimes we work so much that we lose the sight of the role of the offer and the opportunities of the operators in ensuring this accessibility. A very important topic that came up in the conference was the definition of the needs of the travelers who use the public transport. How important it is, we heard from Ms. Director here a moment ago, but also yesterday during the presentation, very interesting presentation on examples from Japan, the example of aging population, which we also have to remember about. As we heard a moment ago in our debate, when designing transport today, we are designing it for ourselves. How to ensure the accessibility for a couple of dozen years. We know how big the scale is of the exclusion. We saw figures like 15 million of Polish citizens having difficulty in satisfying their basic needs because they don't have the access to the means of transport. Without their own car, they can't get to the places they want to get to. But to wrap up those 2 days, Still, the future is bright. We see so many good and smart solutions that our job here is to promote them and to implement them in our areas of responsibility. We have a big role to play here and we have a lot to be done. That's a difficult topic, but that's the topic with the future and the topic which we can manage so that the effects are beneficial, favorable, and that all of us can have access to the transport we dream about, that our transport decisions are not caused by no other options, that they are caused by the choice. And this is how I'd like to thank our speakers, our moderator for participating, for accepting our invitations to the 2 days debate and conference. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this wrap-up. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure now to finish our 2 days meeting. Let me add that this is not the end when it comes to the adventures related with our out-of-hotel activities. We have the study visit and we encourage you to benefit from them. Let me mention that each of them can be chosen, selected. This is very important. There are 2 studies. The first visit is the B zone, and we will go to the rail visit, the journey of the EU funds. We will go to Trzebnica. There will be also the public transport fragment in Wrocław, and we will meet at the end at the main railway station. So take your luggage with you. But the zone A, at the main entrance of the hotel, there will be a special route in Wrocław. The problems of exclusion of the areas of Wrocław, with special emphasis of the disabled and the amenities for them, which were funded by the EU funds. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Choose zone A or B. And continue the topic of the transport exclusion, not only in Wrocław, but also across Poland. Thank you very much. I would just add about the study visit, a small correction. Zone B, Trzebnica, transport exclusion. Zone A, Wrocław, the trail of the funds. For those who go to Trzebnica, the bus will leave at 12 o'clock sharp. It will not wait, as we have to make it on the train, which will not wait as well. So more visits, more details during the visit. And just to use this opportunity for getting the microphone, I would like to thank all of you for coming here, all those who were involved in organization of this event. I would like to thank Ms. Edyta Gratyńska-Karpiel for organizing. A lot of applause for her, for getting to all the speakers, the team of the promotion department of our center, all those who were here on site, the simultaneous interpreters, the sign language interpreters. Those are people who are, well, not very visible, let's say, just like the audio technicians. They are very often behind the black screen and they wear black gloves. It would be hard to get there with this sound. So they are very important guys. And the study visits, remember that we leave at 12 o'clock sharp, and those visits will finish at 3 p.m. Trzebnica comes back to the main railway station at 2:49. This is the additional, let's say, carriage, thanks to the kindness of the our carrier, the Dolnośląskie Rail. The train will be composed of 2 cars, not from 1. So for sure, We will be there at 2:30 at the main railway station, and the PKW visit in Wrocław. Generally, we will make it for the train that leaves to Warsaw after 4 p.m. Trzebnica leaves at 12 p.m. sharp, and we are not waiting for the latecomers. In the meantime, please feel invited to lunch. Thank you very much.